Hello, everyone. Welcome to Martech for 2025, our webinar that will feel like a roller coaster. My name is Frans Riemersma, founder of Martech Tribe, and my co-host is...
Scott Brinker. I am the editor of Chief Martech. It's so great to be here with you, Franz, at the end of the year. It's been an exciting 2024, and 2025 sounds like, it's probably going to be a roller coaster too. Dear audience, before we dive into today's presentation, we want to give a huge thank you to our 5 sponsors: Growth Loop, High Touch, MetaRouter, Progress, and SaaS. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes into the research for reports and webinars like this, as well as the maintenance of the Martech map site and the crazy Martech landscape. It just wouldn't be possible for us to do that without the generous support of these sponsors. So a huge thank you to them. And indeed, you will get to hear from them directly. At the end of our keynote, Franz and I have a series of short interviews with experts from Growth Loop, High Touch, Progress, MetaRouter, and SaaS, really diving into the areas of their expertise: end-to-end marketing on the data cloud with AI, why the next wave beyond CDPs is AI decisioning, lessons of composability for marketing operations, CDP's best friend, how to shift left data quality, and filling in the gaps in governance for generative AI, which I know we're going to get a chance to chat a bit here in just a moment. We also want to thank Goldcast, this incredible platform that you are experiencing today. We just absolutely love the way they bring these events to life. So if you just can't wait to get the report, there should be a little icon up here on the right on Goldcast where you can grab the document, but also feel free to go to the URL martechmap.typeform.com/martech2025. And you can also share that with friends and family. So, Franz, you said it. It feels like a roller coaster. That's what that hype curve looks like. I realized it. But one of the things that we really believe very strongly is that while the hype goes up and it goes down, the underlying technology continues to advance. And it's not just the technology, right, my friend? It's our practice, our development. So in many ways, also, it's not just one hype curve, but it's a multitude of different hype curves. So yeah, wherever you are in your particular stage for particular AI technologies, rest assured there's things both ahead and behind. Franz and I are both fans of Ethan Mollick, who does a lot of writing about the state of LLMs. And there was a quote he had a couple months ago that really resonated, where he said, "We are absolutely at a place where if AI development completely stopped, we would still have 5 to 10 years of rapid change absorbing the capabilities of current models and integrating them into organizations and social systems." And then the punchline: I don't think development is going to stop, though. So with that, we've got a whole bunch of things we'll cover today with you: how AI has reaccelerated the Martech landscape growth, a deep dive in Gen AI use cases in marketing. We'll look at how the structure of the industry has been evolving, both with startups versus incumbents, but also things that are taking us beyond the world of SaaS. And then we will close out with a deeper dive into some Martech stack foundations in this age of AI. So, Franz, shall we begin talking a little bit about how the Martech landscape has been changing?
Sure, if everybody's buckled up, let's go.
All right. Well, you've probably all seen a version of this over the years. For a while, it looked like we were starting to slow down the growth curve of the Martech landscape until back in May, when we released the 2024 edition of the landscape. Woo! It re-accelerated again. We went from around 11,000 solutions on the Martech landscape in 2023 to over 14,000 here in 2024. And the vast majority of these new products were, they were AI native tools, primarily in the long tail. When we think about the distribution of companies throughout the Martech landscape, they're not all equal, of course. There's some very large public companies in the head. There's several hundred, category leaders, vertical market leaders in the torso. And then in the tail, the long tail, you have this incredible array of like new startups and specialist tools and things in different ecosystems and all around the world. And that's where we've seen, this incredible acceleration in new AI products, while at the same time, oh my goodness, yeah, the incumbents in the head and the torso, they haven't been sitting still either. We'll get into some of those differences. Frans, you had even like put together a version of like the Martech Gen AI landscape, just covering those like 2,300 new Gen AI tools. Kind of wild, right?
Pretty well, yeah. This is our role, creating landscapes, and we thought, just have a look. How would it look like? Would it look, very empty? Or this looks impressive already as a landscape, as such. It might be even as big as the entire Martech landscape, I think, from 2015 or 16. Or
kind of crazy, yeah, and so well distributed across so many categories.
Yeah, it's an insane amount, and we're not in it for the fun of collecting logos. It's really to understand what is happening, what is changing, and one thing we learned, and you might recognize this graph from last May, is that we started to see, hold on, you can do transcriptions for not only meetings, you can do it for webinars, you can do it for videos, you can do it for sales automation, enablement, collaboration. Oh my God, there's a whole bunch of use cases, that you can apply in multiple areas, because that is what Gen AI is about. So it's all over the place. How can we nail that down? And we found some 52 use cases that we found particularly interesting and groundbreaking. We're like, okay, great. You know what? Let's spark an idea. Let's do a Gen AI survey. How do we use in marketing Gen AI? And what did we maybe not use yet or stopped using? How did we use it? That was a very nice next step. And when we launched it, oh my God, that was a warm welcome of people saying, okay, we love the survey, we love the landscape. Yeah, that was a bit of a trick, of course, a catch at the end of the survey. You could download the high res, and we had a little glitch there, and you could see how sticky the PDF was, the clickable logos. People, went like, where is my PDF? That's a good sign, but apologies for the inconvenience. It shows that there was really sticky content in there, because it wasn't a small survey, and no less than 283 people responded, completed the survey entirely. Thank you so much. I mean, we couldn't have done it without you. That is absolute amazing. You can see some of the chart here who helped us out, what type of job titles, industries. But you know what? Let's go into some of the results, because we have tons of insights, as you may expect from us. These charts are very detailed. We're not going into this level of detail. Just download the report if you haven't already. And we just like to look at the most popular ones for now. And I think there's not a lot of surprise here. Content, is really dominating the top 12. But there is a little twist here. You can see that content ideation, copy ideation and copy production is really high up there. Down below at number 12, you see content production for video and images. So text opposed to visuals. We'll come back to that later on, time and time again in our research. That is a very interesting one. Well, content, not really a big surprise, most popular. What is the least popular one? Well, ads. So anything ad related, 7 out of the bottom 22 cover advertising type of Gen AI use cases. And mind you, there were 9 ad use cases in total. So 7 really are down below. That's very interesting to understand and see if there will be a change in the future. Now we know the most popular and the least popular, but you would like to know maybe also what are hidden gems. And here it is, because if we expand, the top 12 to top 24, suddenly there's a lot of blue popping up. Blue meaning data. So chat with your data, knowledge and documentation, extraction of data, conversion of it, competitor research, data sourcing, audience building. Oh my God. And when I saw this, it reminded me of an article that I saw earlier last year. It was an interview by the New York Times with the founders of OpenAI. And back then, Elon Musk was still included. And they were talking about the fact and basically confessing that, yes, basically, it's now popular for the conversational nature. But before, it was really meant to ask questions to a data set and get answers. And the whole conversational part, was something new. So you see on the left-hand side something very interesting. Yes, content is popular, but more than we expected, data and management type of solutions and Gen AI use cases are also pretty big. That's fascinating, I would say. Now, most popular doesn't mean you use it every day, or you do. So yes, there is a correlation, but there are some exceptions. So maybe if you look at sales and sales support, number 11, it's ranked 27 of most popular, most mentioned use cases. But if you use it a lot on a daily basis. That's fascinating. The same applies to social, content ideation, production. And what about this one? Content, website, and page building. It's very popular, but you don't use it every day. No, of course not. You're not building a website every day or a microsite or a landing page. You do it on a monthly basis. So cool to see that reflected in the data. Then also, you saw in the previous slide, we're talking about no longer used. We wanted to know which ones are, failing or not working. And there's a lot that doesn't fail. So a lot is working. It's, I think, vouching for Gen AI stickiness. These are all the Gen AI use cases out of the 52 that have a drop off of 2%. That's nothing. I mean, even 5-6% is nothing. And what is striking, again, here are our friends again of the visuals, creating visuals with Gen AI. That's where we struggle most. And there are some interesting solutions to that. Again, cliffhanger, we'll come back to that later. So we looked at no longer used. We also asked not yet tried, because there was this option that you said, okay, this use case, I don't respond at all, or I'm going to tell Scott and Frans that I didn't try it yet, but it might be interesting. So we call it a wish list. And in here, yes, a lot of content, but also some other wild options like talent management or recruitment, email analysis and deliverability, audience building. That is pretty fascinating. So keep it up. And I think these are good New Year's resolutions to start with. Now, this is how often we use Gen AI use cases, but it says nothing about how do we use it, in which type of tools, which type of environment. So Scott, would you like to tell more about that?
Yeah, wow. The structure of the Martech landscape, always shifting, always evolving, and this year has been no different. So we want to dig in a bit to this dynamic between startups and AI functionality being added to existing products and platforms. When we look at the landscape, to us, it's not just startups and incumbents, but actually in the space of startups, we saw two different categories. One, by far the largest, is what we call indie tools. These are tools that specialize typically in one particular capability, many of them on the content side, although increasingly quite a few on the data side. But what's interesting about these indie tools is in many ways, they're actually complementary to the existing incumbent platforms. And we brought a little bit of data on that as well, too. That being said, not all of these new startups are purely complementary to the existing platforms. There are a set of them who are hoping to challenge and disrupt the existing platforms and products. And so we'll talk a little bit about them. And of course, the incumbent platforms, they are not standing still. They're both developing their own AI capabilities, and a number of them have also made acquisitions of key indie tools as well, too. So I mentioned that the indie tools, in many ways, many of them are actually complementary to the incumbent platforms, right? They're extending these new use cases, these new capabilities around those platforms. And one of the places where you see that happening is most of these large platforms, like Salesforce and HubSpot and folks like that, they all have these marketplaces of apps and integrations around their platforms. And a good friend of mine, Hugh Durkin, who tracks on appmarketplace.com the listings in these different ecosystems, noticed that between the year of 2024 overall and just here in the past month of October, just the number of AI apps that are being listed in these ecosystem marketplaces around the existing platforms has grown tremendously. Now, that's the complementary indie tools in these ecosystems. There are also some of these new tools, these new startups that are looking to challenge the incumbents. I think one of the more interesting reads about this was from Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capital firm, also known by A16Z, did a post on death of a Salesforce market map and how they saw that. I won't try and summarize it here, but it's definitely an interesting read. And when we look at this landscape of indie tools and challenger platforms and incumbent platforms, all mixing and matching, within the larger industry and probably within your own tech stack, each of them has their own sets of advantages and disadvantages. I would say if I was going to summarize it, one of the folks at A16Z a number of years ago said that every time you have these technology revolutions, it's usually a race between the startups seeking to get distribution before the existing incumbents get the innovation of that new disruption. So what are you actually using with these new startup tools, whether they're indies or challengers or AI capabilities in your existing incumbent platforms? Well, this is one of the questions we asked here for the Gen AI use case survey. And while there's a small percentage, 23%, who are just experimenting with Gen AI with these new indie tools, or challenger platforms, and there's a small percentage that's only experimenting with AI using AI features in their existing tools, the vast majority of you, 60%, are using some combination of the two. And so we actually did another slice of this data here, looking at okay, well, which categories for Gen AI are people primarily using these indie tools, the most popular to use indie tools? And again, perhaps not surprising, a lot of this is with content, copy ideation, copy production. I mean, if you're sitting there with ChatGPT or, Anthropic's Claude, this is like the classic example of that. But then if we do the sort of the data based on people using Gen AI use cases primarily with the embedded AI features in their incumbent platforms and products, here's where we start to see things like, oh, okay, well, like transcriptions of meetings, very likely in your existing video or, UCAS platform, starting to see use of content personalization and tools that deliver web pages or landing pages for platforms like marketing automation or ESPs, doing email analysis and deliverability. It kind of makes sense. These are your existing workflows with those tools. So as they add AI capabilities into those tools, it's definitely a lot easier to start to experiment with those Gen AI use cases. Given this environment, Frans and I have debated this a bit and have basically come to the conclusion that there's not one right answer to this, whether you should be using indie tools or experimenting with challenger platforms or your incumbent tools. Frankly, for most marketers, we believe the answer is all of the above. That you want to leverage the new AI features being released in your existing incumbent platforms. You want to adopt indie tools that complement those platforms and allow you to experiment quickly and inexpensively. And at the same time, you want to keep an open mind to creative new approaches that are being championed by some of these AI challenger platforms. Whether they ultimately succeed as companies or not, they are likely augurs of the future of how this industry can evolve. But wait, There's more, because while the commercial Martech landscape that Franz and I know so well on martechmap.com, AI is actually helping to drive a couple of new kinds of technology solutions into the Martech stack. So one of them that's having a resurgence here is the expansion of custom apps and custom software in Martech stacks. Now, there's always been a certain amount of custom software in Martech stacks, particularly for larger companies have had the option to, build some of their own specialized solutions. But most of the landscape has been driven by the commercial products. One of the reasons we think custom apps are going to accelerate here in 2025 is, well, you might be creating custom apps and not even realizing it. So here's an example. A few weeks ago, I started up a ChatGPT session, and I asked it to create a stacked area chart for me of the market capitalization of the 10 most valuable companies in the world from 2000 to 2024. And I asked it to categorize them by tech companies versus non-tech companies. Thought that would be interesting. My wish is its command. ChatGPT comes back in a few seconds with this, lovely graph. The orange is non-tech, the yellow is tech. You can see over the past 20 years, tech is, was it Mark Andreessen who said, software is eating the world? We can't necessarily say about the world, but we can say about the market. Software definitely has been eating the market. Okay, well, this is pretty straightforward, right? It's not like this was some sort of custom software. Well, it's interesting. It's this little icon you can see, click on in ChatGPT to see how it actually generated this answer. And what it had done is behind the scenes, it had written a Python program and gone ahead and executed it. And had I not actually clicked on this little icon, I would have had no idea that a software program had been written on my behalf and executed on my behalf. But it was. And we think this is going to result in an explosion of so many new software programs that are now not just being created, intentionally by humans, but that are being created by AI agents on behalf of those humans, without the humans necessarily even fully realizing it. I mean, this has been one of the, long arcs of democratization in marketing technology and technology more broadly that Frans and I have been observing here for, oh my goodness, over a decade, right? We saw this shift from, tech that was rooted in IT to increasingly expanded into marketing operations. As we moved from code to low code to no code, it started to empower more of the power users, in marketing to do more things on their own, maybe using like an Airtable database, for example. But now with these AI agent, I guess we'll call them AI agent dynamic programs being created, at the behest of marketers, simply asking for things in natural language. We think this democratization of software being created is going to explode over the next year and beyond. And so we almost think of this as like, well, there's the crazy, crazy long tail, the commercial Martech landscape. And we talk about, thousands of products in that commercial landscape. As we go beyond the commercial boundary into more custom software, well, there's already been millions of custom apps in Martech that were either created by IT professionals or by marketing operations citizens, developers, using no-code tools. But now, if you think about these AI agents being able to create software on demand, again, without any software skills needed or even an awareness of it being software by the end user, we expect this is going to be billions and billions of agent-created apps. And so it's not just the long tail. We think of this as the hyper tail.
Yeah, and to embrace that, I think it's a very good, and we talked about it, a good way to get a feel for experimenting a lot. Because first we have to figure out what is the problem market fit. And this is where we're hacking. And I think that is something we have to make official. And it's the best of speed. You saw at the democratization of technology that marketers on the right-hand side need to hack a lot. They need to have readily available stuff to play around and see if it works before we put it mainstream in our core stack. So this is experimentation mainly led by marketing teams. That means it doesn't exclude the other teams like marketing ops and IT. They just have a less of a role, maybe more guardrails, but marketing is really leading the dance there. And then once we know, hey, this is a best of need, let's start cleaning stuff up. And a better word for cleaning up is rationalization, and leading by marketing ops teams. And that is where you make sure you prevent legacy. Before you even hand it over to IT, you make sure it's performant, it has no abundance of integrations and data and unnecessary stuff. Go for zero maintenance, because that's what they love in the stack. They have their hands full making sure things are performing, are scaling, and that is what the IT team does with exploitation, making sure we have no experiments or very little, and make sure the customer journeys that we're performing and supporting are working. And this is where we call it best of breed. So best of speed, best of need, and best of breed. That is something we wanted to share with you.
And you know, if there's two things I love in the world, it's alliteration and rhymes. So this is great. We will disclaim, you know, while we expect there's going to be an absolute explosion of custom software and this AI dynamic agent software being created for us, we don't think this is the end of the commercial MarTech landscape by any means. In fact, again, many of these commercial AI platforms and AI tools are the things that are actually enabling a lot of this custom software and help provide the underlying framework for it to be able to operate. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But wait, there is still more. Because in addition to all of these commercial SaaS products that we are used to working with as the heart of the MarTech stack, and in addition now to this increasingly broader array of custom apps and custom software, I think you called it instant software, Frans. I really like that name. Just add water, you know, just add intent, you know, and create software. There's a third category that people have started talking a lot about recently as well, too. This is a little play on SaaS instead of software as a service, service as a software. Basically a way of being able to, instead of, well, you know, put it through this lens of, you know, models and pricing, you know, instead of just buying a SaaS product where you would typically buy, you know, seats, you know, for individual employees, and that was kind of up to those employees to figure out what they were going to do with that software to generate outcomes. You know, we also have had a set of pricing in the MarTech world, the tech world more broadly, around usage, you know, particularly if, you know, you're doing any work with like the hyperscalers, AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, right? You're used to like paying for those API powered services on a usage basis. Still up to you to like achieve the outcomes based on leveraging them. Well, now with these Gen AI agents popping up, we're starting to see a third pricing model of outcome-based pricing, where you're essentially outsourcing, hiring an AI agent to do some sort of outcome for you, right? This might be handling a customer service request like Sierra for AI, or might be handling a certain, you know, in sales, B2B sales like BDR, SDR work, you know, companies like AI SDR and 11X. And so this is going to certainly be interesting from the perspective of marketing operations leaders, is because we already had our hands full, you know, managing that SaaS stack, you know, of, all right, we've got our incumbent platforms, we have a way in which we bring in certain new indie tools or evaluate challenger platforms. Now we're starting to manage more and more guardrails around more and more custom software. Oh, and now we might actually be purchasing certain outcomes within the MarTech or customer experience stack using this service as a software model. One interesting thing we've noted, and this is a little bit forward-looking, but all of these tools, whether they're commercially packaged SaaS apps, or whether they're custom software that's being developed, or these new AI agent services as software, almost all of these behind the scenes are being powered by those hyperscalers like AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. And we think for marketing operations and MarTech management, that might provide an interesting view to how we ultimately orchestrate more of these. But let's dive into a little bit more about these foundations in your MarTech stack for 2025 to be able to be ready for and take advantage of so much of this new innovation that's happening out there. Now, back in May, Frans and I did a survey around composability in the MarTech stack. And one of the things that stood out is this adoption of cloud data warehouses or data lakes or data lakehouses, right? Warehouses, generally structured data, data lakes, generally unstructured data. Sort of the new model everyone's sort of converged upon is this idea of a lake house that is both structured and unstructured. Clever, isn't it? So in our composability survey, which was primarily, marketing tech and marketing operations leaders at mid-sized enterprise companies, it was really exciting to see that the vast majority of them have gone ahead and adopted a cloud data warehouse, lakehouse lake, as part of their MarTech stack. And as you dive into this world, people talk a lot about the modern data stack, and they talk about the data ops ecosystem. The way we look at it is, once upon a time, these data warehouses and data lakes were almost like a one-way repository where, okay, we get data from certain things throughout our company's operations. We pipe it all down to, that data layer. And then frankly, we often didn't do a lot with it, maybe a little bit of analytics. Well, over the past several years, this ecosystem has evolved to be a bi-directional. It's truly an ecosystem in like a cycle where we have most of our apps and operations at the front of marketing and customer experience, generating all this data that does go into our data layer. But now we increasingly have all these other ways in which we're leveraging that data, not just in analytics and our own data science or machine learning, but how we're leveraging it in new generative AI functionality and how we're piping it back into those frontline MarTech apps and MarTech operations to dynamically change the customer experience. This, if it wasn't for AI, because let's face it, AI is really created quite a bit of the narrative noise that we're all wrestling with. If it wasn't for AI, this evolution of what's happening at the data layer would be probably the most exciting thing happening in MarTech right now. All the shift from going on-prem to the cloud, from just structured data to structured and unstructured, from something that is only accessible and usable by a few apps or a few users, to having many apps, many users, not just one way, but two-way cycling of data, from analytics to analytics and operations, from low utilization to high utilization, from interfacing with this stuff in SQL to having now these great UIs and AI agent interfaces for business users, and getting us from a world where, it was kind of cool to think about big data. Increasingly now we're all thinking about big ops, what we do with that data. But that's just one layer of what's happening here, right, Frans?
Yeah, absolutely. So the data layer is really getting so advanced. And as you stated, without Gen AI, only that would, be a revolutionary change and improvement and where it's going. And as you can see here, we just oversimplified it. There are 4 steps. This is a model I worked on with Rasmus Hoeland, personalization expert from Denmark, and good friend of mine. And what you see here is the 4 different stages. The integrations are pretty seamless, back and forth, and we have ETL, reverse ETL, ingestion, stitching, all that kind of stuff. It's beautiful, and we need this for personalization. But there's one thing missing, and you might have seen it already. It's content. Content, it's always something we're waiting for. So this is a quote I got from somebody literally, but there are many, many campaign managers out there that say, okay, we can stream data, we're almost there, we can do everything, real time, and then we wait for content. And that can take hours or maybe even days, if not longer. And why is that so hard? And what can we do about it? Well, with Gen AI, we get to a very interesting intersection. So brand content, this is how it looks like. Just if we copy and paste the 4 stages of the data layer, Why can't we just copy paste that to content? Why is that so hard? Why do we see all those red crosses over there? Like, it's hard to go back and forth and work on it. Well, it's not that the vendors you see on the right-hand side are doing a poor job. I mean, those are the Canvas, the Photoshops, DAM, the web to print, the templatized collateral production tools, the PIMs, the content management tools, DXPs, master data. They're all great companies and vendors. They're doing a great job for decades. It's just so hard to integrate. And why is that? Well, there are three things that we need to bear in mind. First of all, if you have a piece of content and that's normally sitting in a master file, for those who are not too familiar with visual content, because that is what we're talking about. Remember, we spoke about Gen AI use cases. Copy, yes, very popular. That can sit in both layers. And you can do it even maybe real time in emails, but the visuals is something else. So creativity, if you have a master file, the original untouched file where your agency says, this is it. How do you scale it? How do you translate it to your business unit for that specific product in this particular country with that language, with that currency and the metric? That's so confusing and so complex. So you need a trained professional in an agency or an internal studio to translate that. That's creativity. But once you have that, you have to go and render that file. And we all know how big Photoshop files can be, or movie files. It's gigantic. That takes rendering power. Sometimes that in itself takes hours. What if you create a TV commercial? I mean, that can take hours, let alone videos. So then you have integration. So once we have it, how do you ship it from your file server to another one? And this is where you have secure FTP or WeTransfer. We send it. Yes, we're all guilty as charged. We all use that stuff. Why doesn't this work? Well, it didn't work because we had to do it manually. We had humans that had to be trained. So that was one very important rule in the content layer. Don't share the master file, because people will screw it up otherwise. So you have to have guardrails, only trained professionals, and there you go. Well, until Gen AI, because that is really strong and powerful at all three. So let's look at what we could do. Why don't we build a brand LLM specific to your company, your brand, and it contains everything that your brand wants to represent, has represented, and it gives very specific prompts, images, visuals, as to this is what we want to convey and this not. So it's basically a kind of a touchstone. And that touchstone you can use constantly for if you have created content and want to understand, okay, is this correct? Is this within guidelines? Is this on brand? Is this what this particular audience needs to hear? This is where it can give back something like annotations, or maybe even suggest and say, well, for this audience, maybe think about this. And it can even optimize it based on tests and optimizations, personalization, and then it can even produce those files. As you have seen, we abandon most images and video use cases, but that's because we might need a brand LLM to combine it and optimize it. Ultimately, we can imagine that we can even activate the content. We just stream it like we do with data into the engagement channels. I mean, how cool would that be? That would solve a whole lot of problems. And it's not a trivial thing, because we took a step back and thought, hey, a brand LLM is helping out with intangible assets. Now, intangible assets represent 90% of the Standard & Poor's company value. That is insane. So what is intangible? Patents, IP, brand, of course, and tangible stuff is buildings, inventory, and what have you. So intangible assets, the best definition I found is future customer intentions to buy. That represents a lot. So this brand LLM might be even one of the most valuable assets of your company in the future. So if that's not enough, brand and legal compliance, is also very important. You have to be on brand because you invested a lot of money in it and your brand is valuable, but also legal compliance. You want to prevent lawsuits. I know some countries where you don't have the slogan of your company, of your brand in their language, you can face a lawsuit. And then finally, last but not least, there is unprecedented personalization options and possibilities. We only think about real-time serving copy. But what about visuals? What if we can tailor that too, even with visuals of that particular person? And we can even protect, and that is, I think, also a very fascinating part, the creepy factor of personalization. Sometimes it gets creepy, right? A brand LLM can prevent that. Like, oh, don't overdo it. This is, outside the guardrails. I love it. So we've been thinking about this for a while, and this is one of the very, very exciting opportunities that Gen AI is offering.
So there are three legs to this stool for your Martech foundations to be successful in this Gen AI world, or more broadly, just AI, right? Because classic AI is still kicking around here. Some really exciting things happening there with reinforcement learning. We're going to talk about that in one of our interviews. We've got the data layer. This view of the possibilities at the content layer, Frans, that you and Rasmus have been working on, I think is absolutely brilliant, and how that intersection comes together of all this insight we have for customer data and how that gets entwined with an equivalent content data layer. The third piece of the puzzle is, well, all right, for AI agents, try and fill in the blank here. It's a little pop quiz in the middle of our webinar. Blank are to AI agents as data is to AI models. All right, you probably have already guessed this. It's APIs. APIs are what enable AI agents to take action the way that data is what enables AI models to be trained to understand the world. Now there are lots of different ways we can leverage agents to do actions on our behalf, right? That is primarily what takes us from having large language models that are about conversation and natural language interactions to large action models that actually take action out in the world. The folks at Workato did a very large study a few months ago here of over 1,000 respondents, primarily in the IT space, really understanding that it is through APIs that most IT professionals really do see the opportunity for these agents to be able to execute and automate on our behalf in a very well-managed, well-governed way. When Frans and I talked about composability back in May, and if you haven't yet seen that report, again, take a look for the State of Martech 2024. You can pick up a copy. It's also available on martechmap.com. We recognize composability happened at many different levels. It happens with the stack and the different products we combine together. It happens in particular products and platforms in the stack, like composable CDPs or composable DXPs. But most of all, it happens with the workflows inside our organization and the customer experiences we deliver out to the world that are composed of these many different data, content, and very often API-powered services. Now, this rise of composable stacks and platforms and experience is, of course, for marketing operations and MarTech leaders, made APIs super important when they're evaluating MarTech products. In our study back in May, 84% said that APIs were either important or very important in their criteria for which MarTech products to choose. We expect this leveraging of AI agents with APIs to drive that importance even more. But there was an interesting footnote is, many of these marketing ops and MarTech professionals said that, yes, APIs are super important to us, but many of them felt that their existing platforms and products were generally just okay. Maybe they had good coverage, maybe they just had okay coverage. Only about 17% said that they felt their platforms and products had great API coverage. And so this is just our memo to the MarTech vendors who might be tuning in, that this is such an opportunity for competitive advantage. AI agents are only going to accelerate the value that your customers are going to be able to get out of good, great, excellent API coverage in your products. And then ultimately, you step back and you look at all of this with the data layer, you look at with this content layer, you look at leveraging more of these API services across composable stacks and new AI agents and automations. And we just have to like double down that we have moved beyond the age of big data. It was all about managing the scale and complexity of data collected, stored, and analyzed, to the era of big ops, which is the scale and complexity of all these apps and automations and now AI agents that are interacting with that data. And one of the signs, of getting a good big ops structure in place is the governance around that as well, too. Right, Frans?
Yeah, we asked in our survey, of course, about the Gen AI policies. We spoke a lot of companies in the past year, and most of them came with a question: okay, should we have a centralized team or decentralized, or leave it open? So we thought, if you ask us, we ask you, and let's see. Well, it turns out it's a kind of a 50-50 split here. So yes, it's free. And yes, we have a central team or decentralized. That's probably because in specific business units or country, you need to have a kind of liberty, freedom to experiment. Cool. So that was not too shocking. And 50% having one in this time frame, short time frame, I think is pretty good. We also asked, why did you stop using Gen AI? Again, there is stickiness, a lot of stickiness. And some of the people that responded to the survey gave us some feedback. And well, one of the most important things was it didn't save time, and that's why we stopped using it. But there were also compliance reasons and even, price problems, too expensive. And that made us think, hey, that could come from a Gen AI policy. So let's combine the two. And that's what we did. So why did you stop using Gen AI tools? And did you have a Gen AI policy? Now that's interesting because if you have a policy, you're more likely to stop use Gen AI use cases for compliance reasons and also budget reasons, too expensive. So it's really paying off to have some kind of Gen AI policy in place, because imagine all the time and resources you're spending on stuff that you might not even want to use, are allowed to use, or so expensive. And even in the department of didn't save time, 33% with a policy is still a high number. So it's really beneficial for your resources to have a kind of a Gen AI policy in place, we would recommend.
Wow, what a whirlwind, my friend. So I think we have about 10 minutes or so, before we kick off our interviews with our lovely 5 sponsors. What's your takeaway here at the end of this year? What's sort of one thing that like really pops to your mind?
I think if we go back to that quote of Ethan Mollick, we have only scratched the surface, and it's at the very beginning we showed this chart with a hype cycle and this arrow of technology. I think there are 2 types of velocities. One is the technology, and the other one is us. And yeah, software is only as advanced as the person operating it. So we have to learn a lot. We have to embrace it. We have to get to terms with it. We really hope that with our research, the Gen AI use cases, you will try a lot more data and sales related Gen AI use cases. So that's my take. There's so much potential still. It's just so difficult to wrap our heads around it. What is your take on it?
Yeah, sorry, I was getting a little choked up there thinking about all those opportunities. Yeah, I think it's a really great point. The technology continues to evolve, of course, but really the greatest challenge almost all of us have is the organizational side, the human side, the organizational capital. I think one of the things I would take away is, a lot of folks are concerned that as AI continues to accelerate, particularly with agents and more automations, what impact is this going to have on marketers, like marketers' roles? Is this going to increase our work? Are we going to be looking for a new profession? And as I've been thinking a lot about it here, I realize that I'm going to oversimplify and say I sort of think of marketing being in like 3 buckets. There's the creative and strategy, which is what we've always admired, we've always valued. But the truth is, actually, most organizations don't spend a tremendous amount of time on the strategy and creative. Most of our time actually goes in this second bucket of what I will broadly call all the work involved in doing the production and the analysis, keeping the trains running on time, delivering all of that, promise, from the strategy and creative. And then behind that has been this third bucket of marketing operations and marketing tech. Has definitely gotten more valuable over the years, but still, if you just look at the headcount, in most organizations, it's still a relatively small team, and very often doesn't always feel as valued, as they would like to, relative to that big mass of folks involved in production and analysis. My hypothesis is if we look at a lot of what's being enabled with AI technology and marketing, it's mostly about optimizing the work in that production and analysis and empowering greater strategy and creative. And so I think we're going to see this shift where you're going to see this considerable expansion of the amount of strategy and creative. What's possible with these new technologies? We're going to be able to do more creative, get more bold, do more experiments. This is really where the meat and the joy of marketing is. The production analysis, I think, will shrink as a percentage of resources associated with it, because we'll rely on more and more AI and automation to do that. But at the same time, I actually also think we're going to see an expansion, both in the investment, but also in the respect and appreciation we have for that marketing operations and marketing tech team. Because those foundations we were talking about with the data layer, with the content layer, with the API, layer, and how we manage all of that big ops world, we need that to be really great in order to power the strategy and creative. And so I think, I think we're going to see a lot of shifting, in the overall marketing organization in the next few years here. But I'm pretty bullish that for the strategy and creative and for the marketing ops and marketing tech, it's actually going to be a bit of a golden age.
I couldn't agree more. And I think if you just trigger me and add some new thoughts. And what is really important is that we focus on the customer, right? And all too often we want to be customer centric and we are not. I'm not sure if this now Gen AI will free up the work, but that middle part that you just described, if that shrinks, because there's a lot of time involved in, configuring software, buying it, implementing it, and then the data, all those time, our backs are facing the customer. And I think with Gen AI, we can speed this up and, chat to your data, chat to your customer. You get a better feel, a quicker feedback loop of what is it that they really, really want. So it's almost like it feels to me in the coming years, there's no more hiding. We have to understand the customer. There's no escape. And I really like still this quote a lot, where I think marketers are the storytellers of the company. And storytelling is data with a soul. So the data and all the technology around that is starting to become more and more democratized, so we can focus on the soul. What is it this customer really wants to know, wants to hear right now, needs right now? And how can I supply that and make sure we offer that in the shortest time frame possible, maybe for the best price? I really hope we get to that point, but maybe I'm carried away a little bit too much.
I am carried away with you, my friend. Well, we are going to wrap up our keynote here and give all of you a couple-minute quick break if you want to go grab a beverage or a nature visit. And then we're going to be picking up with 5 really exciting interviews with our sponsors, Growth Loop, High Touch, Progress, MetaRouter, and SaaS. These are not sales pitches. We are basically plugging into the expertise, of 5 of the smartest people that we know at these companies, and we'll be asking them some pretty candid questions, about how they're seeing the space around their work evolving. So definitely come back for that. Just a reminder, you can grab a copy of this 108-page report. 108 pages. Oh my goodness, my friend. I mean, like, this is the Martech encyclopedia that we're creating here. You can also pick up a copy or share this URL with your friends, martechmap.typeform.com/Martech2025. And with that, we're going to say thank you to our sponsors.
Yes.
Thank you, as always, for your collaboration.
Likewise, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much.
And huge thank you to all of you in the audience for joining us. We will see you back here in 5 minutes.